So about 6 months ago, I had the opportunity to test drive the Breitling Premier B01 chronograph. I didn't anticipate reviewing the watch, and I have to admit, it's probably one of the regrets I've had for the year because for one, I was impressed with it, and after posting it on Instagram a few times, it seemed like there was a lot of interest to cover it. But now 6 months later, and realizing that I think this is one of the better pieces that Breitling makes, I think it's time to finally take a closer look at it. And guys, before we look at this Breitling here, just an important update. I added 3 more brands to my website, one of them being Orient. So full factory warranty, authorized dealer of Orient watches. As of right now, I'm just shipping to North America, so there's gonna be some limitations, but for other brands, I've now expanded out my distribution. So go check out the site, 20 different brands now, full authorized dealer, full factory warranty for all the brands that I'm carrying, as well as having a wide array of different straps as well, with many of them being made in the USA, and all purchases support this content that I'm creating here. But back in 2018, when this Breitling Premier B01 was released, I initially really liked the design. And I'm not normally somebody that likes Breitling designs. I found a lot of their designs being a little bit too large for me and kind of appealing towards a more flashy type of persona, which I am certainly not that type of buyer. But this one for me, it was different. It had a sense of classiness with it and timelessness to it. The case size was a little bit larger, but was still in a range where I don't think it was overly large in comparison to what is normal for Breitling. And I think it also had some elements that made it seem very modern. It was just something very different than what I've been seeing from Breitling in the past, say, 15 to 20 years. But first, a little bit of backstory on the Premier. This family of watches was released first during the 1940s and saw surges in popularity following World War II as civilians shifted to a new world, rebounding from the unrest of years prior. This movement towards a more normal world made way for the Premier to be a popular watch of the period among those that are looking for the combination of function and elegance. But in the years that followed, the Premier kind of fell out of favor with the rise of other popular Breitling models like the Navitimer and Super Ocean. Following the formula of these popular models and creating different takes on their designs really became a popular trend for the brand in the past couple of decades. However, with the announcement of this Premier B01 a couple years back, I recall immediately shifting more of my attention than normal to the brand. But before we crown this thing, let's take a closer look at this piece. And then at the end, recap what I think this piece means for Breitling and just some ideas that I think probably would make sense to continue in the future. First, with the rundown of the specs here, we have a case size of 42 millimeters, thickness of 13.6 millimeters, lug width of 22 millimeters, lug to lug of 49.5 millimeters, water resistance of 100 meters, movement is an automatic Breitling B01, and the crystal is sapphire. Now, when it comes to the area of wearability in the world of Breitling, we typically have watches that are going to appeal to a certain type of buyer, which is especially true in the mid-2000s through the shift in ownership a few years back. Having case sizes of 44 millimeters and up was really just part of the norm of the brand. And despite this Premier still having a notable presence, it definitely deviates from those typical standards that Breitling had in years prior. Looking at this piece on the wrist, we have a relatively larger case still coming in at 42 millimeters in diameter and a relatively sizable lug to lug of 49.5 millimeters. This said, the piece is not over the top in terms of sizing and surprisingly wears quite well on my smaller wrist. And I do think that I could probably pull this thing off. The watch lays on the wrist quite well given the automatic chronograph movement within, with it measuring at 13.6 millimeters thick in its totality, making this thinner than many other automatic chronographs that contain the commonly seen value 7750 and 7753 that are typically going to extend over 14 millimeters. For the lug width here, we have a lug width of 22 millimeters with a factory alligator strap that is nicely constructed and wears well when working in. Transitioning down to the buckle end of the strap, we have a deployant buckle. The buckle design comes with a 2-button release for extra security to ensure it will not come undone and has polished edges that really elevates the look of this. Looking closer at the case, we have a polished front side of this case here with brushing along the side, which include grooved linear marks along the side of the case that help add to the sleekness and makes this Premier appear a bit thinner. Along the right side of the case, we have the inclusion of a heavily notched crown that helps when engaging, and two rectangular style pushers that barely extend out from the case and assist in the wearing experience without taking away, which typically can happen when you're dealing with a chronograph. But the 2 o'clock pusher stops and starts the chronograph in typical function, and then the 4 o'clock pusher will reset the chronograph. But before flipping this watch over and taking a closer look at the B01 movement within, I first want to look at another point with this watch that I feel ultimately drew me in and is perhaps the greatest separation from the normal design aspects that we would expect from Breitling with this dial layout. Ever since the 1990s and 2000s, I felt Breitling had a design style that really resembled what was popular during that period, which was very much about larger pieces. Yet I don't think they transitioned away from this as time passed by, making the designs feel a little bit dated, not in a vintage or classic sense, but almost as if you were watching one of your friends who is clinging on to an out of fashion trend, yet they haven't really gotten the hint yet. I think this underlying idea is in no way able to be applied to this watch here, as the Premier has a sense of timeless sophistication and modern feel molded together. At the time of the release of this piece, there were a couple different dial options to choose from. However, this was the piece that most appealed to me, this white and black panda dial. Starting at the dial outskirts, we have a black tachometer scale that is elevated from the dial surface, which will provide a level of depth. The dial color comes in a whitish cream color, but really will depend on the light. In well-lit environments, the dial transforms to a true white, and in darker, shady areas, it comes across as more of a cream. Regardless, it pairs exceptionally with the black tachometer scale and the 2 black chronograph registers. The register at the 9 o'clock is the running 60 seconds, and then at the 3 o'clock, we have a 30-minute register. Both registers contain a thin groove finish within and white markings that contrast with the black surface. At the 12, we have the writing of the brand's logo with the applied B above, which to me, I personally enjoy more on pieces that don't have the strongest of aviation undertones, but I know a lot of people like that classic wing aviation style logo that Breitling has rolled out, but I just feel that that sits more at home on models like the Navitimer. At 6, we have writing pointing out the chronometer chronograph caliber within and a date window below that has a disc to match the dial color. Rising up from the surface, we have polished applied hour markers that match the loom-filled pencil style hands at the center, with the thin second hand coming with a red painted tip. Now back in 2009, Breitling made a big announcement when they unveiled their in-house automatic chronograph caliber, the B01. The B01 has been a caliber that has been featured in lines like the Chronomat and the Navitimer in recent years until making its way into the Premier line. The movement is intriguing for a few reasons. One is that it is developed in-house, and that always manages to garner up discussion and respect, especially when it comes to chronograph movements. However, this can be furthered more by a few other additional features of this movement. First, it is a column wheel chronograph, which can be seen easily through the open caseback and makes it a pleasure to stop and start, with the button action being incredibly smooth and satisfying, especially in comparison to traditional cam lever systems that will come on the popular Valjoux 7750. The B01 also contains a vertical clutch, which has the added benefit of being completely integrated to the wheel train and will lead to a smooth stop and start of the second hand without any small micro jumps. It also has a patented spring system that assists in changing the date at any period, as those familiar with other popular chronograph calibers usually are aware of this danger zone of changing the date between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. As with this movement, there's no concern of this. And finally, the movement, of course, is going to perform very accurately, running at cost specifications, and manages an impressive power reserve of 70 hours with just one mainspring barrel, which is a healthy power reserve for a simple three-handed watch, let alone a chronograph. But again, just to run it down here, we have a 4 Hz, 28,800 vibrations per hour movement, features hacking and hand winding, so you can stop the second hand when pulling out the crown to the farthest position, and you can hand wind the movement, of course. 70-hour power reserve again, and then this is a cost certified movement as well. So just to unpack here, why I wanted to cover this watch was because I thought it was a very interesting standout product from Breitling's entire catalog. It's certainly not perfect in a lot of areas. I mean, the $8,400 retail price is certainly high for this watch, and I think some people will have resistance to that. But from a design point of view, and then also what this represents as an opportunity for Breitling, I think that can't really be overstated here. There's something fresh about this, but also there's something timeless about this design, which I really haven't been able to say about many Breitling watches as of late. And this one just pulled me in, captivated me. I think it's a really good looking piece 42 millimeters is a little bit large, but if they were able to get this thing down to say 40 millimeters, or at least offer something there, I could imagine, at least from the enthusiast point of view, there being a lot of interest in this. I know who Breitling kind of appeals to with their market is very different than probably people that watch this channel, because they are very mass market in terms of who they're producing watches for, but I would imagine this type of design style doing quite well if it was continued to be pursued. There's cleanness here, there's a sleekness here, and really what that 1940s design of the Premier was meant to be, I think is very much embodied here in a modern sense with this watch. And then also you're getting the B01 movement inside here, different dial colors, keep the B01, smaller case, if they can get a lower price for that as well. The only reason why I say that and why I think that's definitely doable is just because Breitling and Tudor exchange technologies, as Breitling's Super Ocean line features one of Tudor's in-house calibers, and then vice versa, Tudor is actually featuring the B01 in their Black Bay chronograph, for example. And that watch is coming in around $5,000. So if they can get more to that price range and then package this type of style and design undertones, I think this is a big winner. And I think we've been seeing some things from Breitling here that have really kind of turned me on a little bit in terms of repositioning the brand in a light that I would be appealed by. I think introducing models from the Breitling Top Time series certainly was a good idea. I love that. I mean, that's a great classic vintage design formula to pull from, and I would love to see just more being invested in that range. But overall, I think this Breitling Premier B01 is probably one of the best looking Breitling watches that they currently make, and I really hope that this is signs of more things to come rather than something that was just more of an anomaly. So guys, I'd love to hear your comments down below. What do you think of this watch? Love to hear your thoughts here. What do you think of Breitling in general as a brand? Also, I want to thank Bob's Watches for sending me this watch again. I'll leave a link in the description as well, because they do have this watch for sale as well if you are interested. But also guys, definitely check out my website, teddybaldassarre.com. Have 20 brands available for sale, different selection of straps. Really proud of the offering there, and also gonna be adding about half a dozen more brands in the coming months. So very excited about it. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.